It's the early 20th century and the blank spaces on the world map are nearly filled. Among the few that remain are the two poles of the Earth, the North and the South Poles. But that is about to change. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen begins preparing for an expedition to the North Pole. After months of planning, tension and incredible twists of fate, on December 14, 1911, he and 4 companions finally reach the pole, but not the North Pole, as originally planned, but the South Pole. Later, he would sum up the story with these very true words: "Never before has a man reached a goal so diametrically opposed to the one he originally set out for." Amundsen, born in 1872 in the Norwegian town of Borg, was drawn to icy, distant lands from an early age. His family owned ships, and several of his relatives were naval captains. But at his mother's insistence, he pursued medical studies. However, after her death, he left school and at 21 set off on his first journeys. One of his first true adventures was a Belgian scientific expedition to Antarctica, where their ship Belgica became trapped in ice, forcing the crew to overwinter on board. Between 1903 and 1906, during another expedition, Amundsen became the first to navigate the Northwest Passage, sailing from Greenland along the coast of North America to Nome, Alaska, aboard the ship Gjoa. This journey later proved crucial. From the Inuit, he learned survival techniques that he would use many times. He mastered the use of sled dogs, realized that animal fur provides far better insulation than wool coats, and discovered that raw meat could prevent scurvy, a deadly disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, which at the time was the greatest fear of all sailors. Amundsen was, in many ways, an unconventional explorer. For him, expeditions were primarily a competition where the winner takes all. His greatest inspiration was another famous Norwegian polar explorer, Fridtjof Nansen. In 1893, Nansen allowed his ship, Fram, to become trapped in ice, letting it drift with the ocean currents, hoping it would eventually reach the North Pole. Although he did not succeed, he became a legend for the next generation of polar explorers. Now, in 1907, Amundsen approaches Nansen with a request to borrow the Fram. Nansen agrees, on the condition that the ship be used for a thorough study of ocean currents in the Arctic Ocean. Amundsen promises to do so, assembles a crew, and begins dreaming of planting the Norwegian flag at the North Pole. However, his dream was doomed before it even began. In September 1909, reports emerged that the North Pole had already been reached, not once, but by 2 separate American expeditions, one led by Frederick Cook and the other by Robert Peary. Although the planned scientific mission in the Arctic Ocean could still yield important discoveries, Amundsen made up his mind. This was no longer the right path. The ship was already borrowed, the crew assembled, so on August 9, 1910, the Fram set sail north. Or at least, that's what everyone believed, except for 2 members of the team. Only after 4 weeks upon reaching Madeira, Amundsen knew there was no turning back. It was time to reveal the truth. We are heading south. The British planned to incorporate Antarctica into their empire, and Robert Scott is already on his way with 65 men, motorized sleds and ponies. It seems the only thing he forgot about is us. Thus begins what is now known as the race to the South Pole. Many see Amundsen's unexpected maneuver as unsportsmanlike, but not him. Moreover, he has no intention of following the same route as his rival Scott. The Norwegian expedition chooses a new path, where no human has ever set foot. They establish their base camp in the Bay of Whales, about 1,300 kilometers from the pole in a straight line. Amundsen plans to cross the Queen Maud Mountains, whose peaks rise almost 3,000 meters. Later, critics would claim that Amundsen was simply lucky and that his expedition was far less challenging than the British effort. But the truth is, the crew of the Fram was exceptionally well prepared. Not only was their base camp Framheim nearly 100 kilometers closer to the pole than the starting point of their British rivals, but they also managed to set up more supply depots along the route than the Brits. All 5 men who embarked on the final leg of the expedition were skilled navigators and experienced skiers. They wore warm animal fur, and sled dogs helped carry their supplies, though Amundsen did not hesitate to shoot and eat some of them along the way. Then, at last, the moment arrives. In mid-December, the 5 explorers reach their destination. To their great relief, they find no trace of Scott's expedition. If this is truly the South Pole, then they are the first to stand here. They take multiple measurements, but soon there is no doubt. They have reached the southernmost point on Earth. Amundsen leaves behind a tent, a Norwegian flag, and a letter for Scott's team. Scott's exhausted expedition, devastated by a series of misfortunes, stumbles upon the site 34 days later. When they see the Norwegian tent, they fall into utter despair. Amundsen returns back to his base after 99 days. He completes the journey 10 days faster than planned. In March 1912, he arrives back in civilization and learns that there is still no news of Scott's expedition. Then, at the beginning of the following year, the world discovers that all members of Scott's polar team perished on their return journey. This casts a bittersweet shadow over Amundsen's phenomenal success. The British press in particular criticizes his sudden change of plans and harsh treatment of sled dogs, while the fallen Scott is hailed as a national hero. In the following years, Amundsen finally begins preparing for the northern expedition he had promised Nansen. However, due to World War I, he is unable to set out until 1918 aboard his new ship, Maud. By this time, however, he is dreaming of something entirely different, reaching the North Pole by air. In an era of rapid aviation advancements, this is a cutting-edge vision, but for Amundsen, it leads to financial ruin. He is forced to declare bankruptcy and even send back to Siberia 2 Inuit girls, whom he had taken in during his last voyage. Yet despite these setbacks, his obsession with the North Pole remains unshaken. Amundsen's dream comes true in May 1926. Along with 15 other men, he finally reaches the North Pole. However, he does not get to set foot on it. He only sees it from the window of the airship Norge. The international crew drops 3 flags onto the ice: Norwegian, American, and Italian. The Italian flag is reportedly the largest, further fueling tensions between Amundsen and Umberto Nobile, the Italian responsible for the technical aspects of the flight. Still, it is a historic day. The expedition is the first to reach the North Pole beyond any doubt. It also confirms that the pole lies on a frozen ocean, not solid land. And Amundsen, he becomes the first person to see both poles of the Earth. Nobile would return to the North Pole once more, in 1928, aboard the airship Italia, this time without Amundsen. Yet, ironically, it is this very expedition that writes the final chapter of Amundsen's life. On May 25, 1928, about 120 kilometers northeast of Svalbard, the Italia crashes with 16 people on board. Rescue teams from 8 countries mobilize. Norway is among them. And despite his strained relationship with Nobile, Amundsen himself joins the search on June 18th, flying out with 5 other men to look for survivors. What happened next remains a mystery to this day. What is certain, however, is that Amundsen's team never reached the wreckage of the Italia. Most likely, their hydroplane crashed into the Barents Sea in heavy fog. The entire crew perished. Later, a float and part of the fuel tank from the crashed aircraft were found near the Norwegian coast. The greatest polar explorer of all time died too soon. He was only 55 years old. But he left this world just as he had lived, in action, battling harsh nature and seeking the unknown.